Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome to Beyond the Score. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend about 45 minutes to an hour with us today, talking about the Battelle Early Academic Survey, the BEAS, which is the newest member of the BDI-3 family. We have Dr. Pettigrew here today, who's going to talk about using the BEAS as a strong foundation for the ARD and IEP process. So I'm really excited to hear from her here in just a second. I do want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. There is a copy of her PowerPoint slide deck that is attached as a PDF to the control panel. If you want this, you need to download it and save it prior to us exiting out of the webinar. So if you don't save it, it goes away. So save that. We are recording this, so if you get pulled away, which I know happens often, you can reach out to me. I can send you the link so that you can listen to it at your convenience. We do have future Beyond the Score webinars coming up, so take a look at those. You can find those on the Riverside Insights PD webpage, as well as on the csep.online website. There will be a certificate of participation that will be emailed out to you tomorrow around this time. You should receive an email from GoToWebinar with a link to download your certificate for your records. So I think that takes care of all of the housekeeping items. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pettigrew and let her introduce herself and get started.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stevens. I still call you Tammy. Tammy was one of my students in the diagnostician program at Texas Woman's University, where I still teach. I'm still teaching those same classes, but I am also a working diagnostician. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm old. I was around in 1965 when Head Start began, and I was one of the first Head Start teachers. I was a senior in high school. My home economics teacher, at that time in 1965, we had summer home economics, because really home economics was an outgrowth of the extension department. And the extension department was focused on helping women learn how to take care of their summer vegetables, how to store food, how to sew, all sorts of things related to home living. And so we had summer home economics. And in 1965, Betty Carson got the grant for Decatur ISD, where I live, to have the Head Start program. And she asked me as a senior to teach the other class while she taught one of the classes. And so that was my introduction to early childhood. I graduated from college in 1969-70 and started right away teaching. So over 50 years working in education. There was no special education when I started teaching. I had children with all sorts of disabilities in my second grade class and my third grade class. I was also one of the first kindergarten teachers in Texas public school. If you can believe this, I had 50 kindergarten students all day long with no aid. I wore a whistle around my neck for crowd control. And then I was one of the first special education teachers. The state of Texas actually did grants for teachers to go to school and get the endorsement on their certification to teach kindergarten and to teach special education. And I did both. My special education certification is in language learning disability. The term specific learning disability had not yet been developed. And then later on, I became one of the first gifted education teachers in Texas. I love what I do being a diagnostician. I have been almost 40 years working as a diagnostician. I have seen lots and lots and lots of changes in the field, not just with how we identify children and the tools, but just the theoretical perspective that we take. Well, what I want to do today is talk with you about a relatively new tool that I am in love with. It is the Battelle Early Academic Survey. It is one of the strongest early childhood academic assessments that I have ever worked with. And I want to link it to a process that you already know, that ARD process. Now, this is not my original diagram. This is something that Jim Walsh, you probably know him as the law dog. This is something that he presented in a class that I was in. Along the way, trying to decide what I wanted to do when I grow up, I got my mid-management certification. It's now called principalship. And the person who taught that class, Dr. Kimmerer, wrote the law textbook with Jim Walsh. And he had Jim Walsh in our class because they were headed to a conference to talk about their book. And Jim Walsh showed this to us. This is his IEP meeting, ARD meeting pyramid. And he stressed that the foundation of any ARD meeting should be a review of the assessment. For that initial ARD meeting that we are doing, it is the initial assessment that we have just conducted. For the annual ARD, it's the review of the IEPs, the progress that a student has made. It's a review of any state testing that has been done, any of the information that the teacher has. We get information from the parent. Then we use that as the foundation for developing our IEP, for planning the services, and then selecting the site that this child will do this. Now, he stressed that it's not just which school in the district a child is going to go to, but Jim Walsh said it's also the program within your school that is considered a site. Now we would call it the location. But I want to show you in this discussion with you how the BEAS is a really strong foundation with that assessment piece. And we'll start with just taking a look at one of the first tools that I found when I was transitioning from working on an elementary campus to doing early childhood assessments. Willis and Dumont are two psychologists that teach at a university in the northeastern part of the United States. And I found this intriguing that these men who do not know early childhood were critiquing the normed achievement tests for young children. So we're going to go through their 10 problems that they see and look at how the BEAS addresses those. The first one is that there's no agreed curriculum for preschool or kindergarten. Young children are inconsistent in their responses. They have short attention spans. They are easily fatigued. Sampling works well for a large domain. Rapid development. They say that you should have norms based on how many weeks old the child is. The item format is important. Item gradients are necessarily very steep. Norming sample, they said that's a huge problem when you're gathering data on young children. Insufficient floors, and then criterion referenced tools, formal and informal, may be more informative. So let's take a look at their first one. Now, throughout this slide, you are going to see the Battelle teddy bear. He is featured in the Battelle Developmental Inventory 3rd edition and in the BEAS, and he is an important feature. So no agreed curriculum for preschool or kindergarten. Yeah, that is true. If you look across the United States, the expectations for pre-K students vary significantly. But the BEAS recognize this. The BEAS skills are linked to the Common Core state curriculum that includes kindergarten. And so when you look at the BEAS, the age span includes those kindergarten age children that are starting. Pre-K guidelines are not included because there is so much variability. However, the BEAS developers did look at the documents that states have for their pre-K curriculum to make sure that they were assessing common skills. Now, for the reading and the math portions that you're going to see and hear about, they looked at the foundational skills for the Common Core State curriculum, and they took the key elements. It's not specific to any one state, but it's those key elements. We'll take a look at that a little bit more in depth. The next one is that young children are inconsistent in their responses. Well, the BEAS recognizes the rapid change that happens in receptive, expressive, and motor skill development in young children. In the training material, in the examiner's manual, it talks about being aware of the different ways that children respond, recognizing that this needs to be more play-like than when you're giving for example, the WJ4 achievement test. This is an achievement test for young children, but it differs in the fact that it recognizes child development individualities within children. I think this is one of the strongest features, that it recognizes, you may need to take a break. You may need to find out ahead of time, what does this child like to play with? Use it as a reward for that child. Look at that, you just did that, great. And then do that work-play cycle with them. It's recognized in the BEAS. It's the only achievement test for young children I've ever found where they say, you have to do this. Be aware of the child's individual needs. And then they said, Willis and Dumont said, short attention spans, they get easily fatigued. Well, I've been talking about this. The BEAS says you need to have knowledge of child development. Not only that, but you need to know the individual child that you are assessing. That means you're going to have to spend some time up front when you're scheduling the assessment. If it's a community referral, the parent is requesting an evaluation on their child that's not yet in school, you want to interview them and talk with them. Find out what the child likes. Find out what are edible reinforcers. Does the child do better with praise or with having something more tangible? And use that to your advantage. Give those breaks, let them play for a little bit, and then bring them back to the testing situation. They do get fatigued, mainly because they are active, and recognize that. Do some motor breaks, do some jumping, do some ball play. Informally, that will give you some information about their motor skills. And then Willis and DuPont, I've lumped 3 together. Item number 4, item number 5, and item number 8 on their list. They talked about sampling working well for a large domain. We're looking at some pretty specific skills, and so they question whether or not sampling is appropriate in the same manner as when we're gathering norms for a multi-age level achievement test. They also referenced the rapid development in young children and then the norming sample. Well, the BEAS followed the 2020 projections from the U.S. Bureau of Census with whatever stratifications applied. That's the same ratio as the gender, the same parental education level, the ethnicity, and then the geographic locations. And they matched pretty closely what is seen. So they broke it down into the age ranges. 42 to 47 months is a pretty good age cluster. That's 6 months. And that's fairly typical in our early childhood assessments, that we do 6-month clusters. They had a target of 100 students across all of the age ranges. And you'll see the only one where they did not get that was the 84 to 89. In fact, they actually went over the targeted number of children. There were some supplemental studies that were done where they expanded their number in the sample so that it was over 1,000, looking at some specific studies, for example, children with a particular type of disability. How did they do on the test? That's a subset. This is the sample that was used in the norming. If I were looking at a test for young children, I would consider this a very strong sample. They also talked about, Willis and Dumont, about the item format and the way it's presented being so critical for young children. One of the strengths that I see in the BEAS is I'm not having to figure out if I can use this test with a child with a specific type of disability, say, for example, motor or deaf, hard of hearing. The BEAS takes that into consideration in their examiner's manual. They talk about, here's ways that you can accommodate a child who's deaf, hard of hearing in the administration of this test. Here's ways that you can accommodate a motor delay in this test. And motor delays are not just things like having a delay in fine motor development. For example, you've likely encountered a young child with cerebral palsy and how you have to adapt for them. The developers of the BEAS really looked at child development and saw that we do need to address these. We have to consider the individual differences of the child. And so they constructed items and gave you strategies to use to help you in being able to use the strong focus on academics to learn about a child. Just check out the examiner's manual for information on that. Then Dumont and Willis talked about how item gradients are necessarily very steep. An item gradient is where it's a quick jump from a very basic skill to a very advanced skill. When the developers were working on identifying items that would be appropriate, the first thing that they did was they reflected what we know about child development and what we know about the sequence of skill development. Now, this was likely a very involved analysis where we would say at this age level, children should be able to do this. Looking at all of the state's pre-K curriculums, is this a target skill for those children? I'm sure this was a process that involved multiple returns as more information was gathered. They looked at all of the states and included the territories where we support education. They went beyond just looking at paper documents. They brought in experts. They had 20 different, over 20 as a matter of fact, different experts, not only in, say, for example, phonemic awareness, but they also had assessment experts that were there. All of the items that were developed and considered for the norming, what the final product would be for the test, were reviewed for their content validity. If a test item did not meet content validity, it was thrown out. And in the BEAS, they describe content validity as the degree to which questions, tasks, or items on a test are representative of the universe behavior meaning what's expected across the field, across different places, different ages, different state curriculums, are representative of the universe behavior the test was designed to sample. So if we're looking at phonemic awareness, did this question target phonemic awareness at an age-appropriate level? I think that is very critical when we are looking at our youngest learners, making sure that we are assessing the skills that are developmentally appropriate, as well as the skills that are critical for their development of reading, writing, and math skills. Then the ninth issue that Willis and Dumont had with early childhood achievement assessments is insufficient floor. An insufficient floor is those lower items. If you think about some of the achievement tests that we give, that KTEA for 4-year-old children, the WJ4 ECAD, early childhood, early cognitive academic development, even though that the ECAD starts at a 2.5-year-old child, there's only a few items that are really targeted at that age. That's the nature of developing an achievement test, particularly one with young children. It's difficult to identify the items. The BEAS is strong in that. It has really done a thorough analysis of looking at the task analysis for what's appropriate from child development perspective and from academic development. Well, in looking at the items, the BEAS development team used the standards analysis that they had just conducted to design a scope and a sequence that would be optimal for the development when you consider child development and skill development. I think this is one of the strongest features. It does not start off with phonemic awareness at the same level as, say, the KTEA for a 4-year-old, a pre-K age style child. It looks at the more foundational skills and really assesses them in, to be honest with you, a fun way. The children that I've given it the BEAS to really enjoy the testing session. Another issue that Willis and Dumont stressed was, sometimes you get more information from looking at criterion referenced tools, whether they are formal or informal. Well, the BEAS has a strength in the fact that it can be used to monitor a student's growth and the intervention program effectiveness over time. You can do a pre-test and post-test measure and then look to see how is the student progressing. We would hope to see a steady growth rate if the program is being effective. If it's not, if we're not seeing that steady growth rate, then we would look at the intervention that we're doing, as well as look at the individual child and see, are we not addressing the needs appropriately? I think that's one of the strengths which helps the BEAS be a strong foundation in the IEP process. I do want you to know that I will share when I get it finished. I'm taking the pre-K guidelines and doing a skills analysis and targeting it to the pre-K guidelines so that you have a tool that you can use in helping you to develop IEPs and to analyze the data and write your reports based on the impact of, we'll use that term, the impact of the delays and the child's needs. It's an excellent tool, and I'm working hard on trying to get Head Start to accept it, to evaluate a program and determine the impact of the programming that we are doing, looking at different groups of children. If there's anybody out there that's working on a dissertation, the BEAS would be an excellent tool to use, looking at early childhood education and development of foundational schools, because it's designed for pre-test, post-test. It would be an excellent tool to develop an intervention and then evaluate it. Now, I'm going to go back. I want you to take a look at this. Criterion reference tool, formal and informal, may be more informative, pre-test and post-test. And I can hear your brains going, what? You mean I'm going to have to give another test to the child? No. Pre-test, post-test would be taking your information and using it, say, when the child is exiting the early childhood special ed program, going into kindergarten, and looking again at their skill development, seeing the progress that they've made. But it can also be used, as I've been talking about, for pre-test, post-test within a pre-K classroom, within a Head Start program, because it provides a very strong tool for looking at that growth. So you can rest easy. You're not being asked to do that. Another strength that I find very powerful in the BEAS is the test user qualifications. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the professional organizations that we follow. American Psychological Association is one. In an article by Turner et al., they stated the combination of knowledge, skills, abilities, training, experiences, and where appropriate, practice credentials that the APA consider desirable for the responsible use of psychological tests. That's the definition of test user qualifications. But the BEAS goes a little bit beyond. It looks at two broad groups. One group is the ones that have sufficient training so that they could administer and secure the assessments and accurately score them reliably with some supervision. Now, there's the other group, which is us, the individuals who interpret and report psychological tests. We have the training, we've had the supervised experience, your practicum, your in-class instruction where your professor was critiquing your scoring and your test administration, either observing you or through video. So the BEAS accepts two levels of user qualifications. One would be like the classroom teacher, and one would be like us. APA looks at two broad categories, American Psychological Association, two broad categories. One is generic knowledge and skills, and the other is qualifications in specific context areas, like early childhood education, or employment testing, or career testing, or healthcare settings. A teacher who has the coursework in early childhood education would have that knowledge and skills about the specific area in which they would be testing. And so the BEAS considers that. The primary target group for the BEAS is the preschool, kindergarten, and primary grade teachers. Now that could be our special education teachers. My pre-K teachers could give this. The Head Start teachers could give this. Special education teachers could give this. The school psychologist or the educational diagnostician. So that question, that what, the BEAS is intentionally designed to be used by the personnel in the classroom. Even a teaching assistant in the classroom with specific training and with supervision could administer some of the subtests. So I see a tool, a strong tool in the BEAS in the IEP development through using it as a criterion referenced tool as well. In addition to understanding testing and measurement, the test developers stress that you should be familiar with child development. You should have knowledge of the child that you are assessing relative to the norming sample. And we've talked about all throughout this presentation that you need to know child development, you need to know the child. I think this is the first test that I have ever encountered in my almost 40 years of being a diagnostician and my almost 55 years in education that stresses child development and knowledge of the child have to go hand in hand in order for you to be able to effectively work with the child. It is a very user-friendly test. It is one of the most user-friendly that I have ever given. And I'm a huge play-based assessment believer. I support that. This test recognizes that. The item response booklet has the test items, the administration procedures, the scoring information. It tells you what materials you're going to need. You can record the students' responses on the BEAS, but I love the mobile data solution. I was really hesitant about it at first. I put off trying it because I know what young children want to do with the iPad. They want to start banging on it. They want to start pushing buttons. You can use it using your computer, the mobile data solutions. You can use with your computer, Mac, or a PC. You can use it on the iPad. It's really the test items. You do not use a second iPad. And that was my misconception. The test booklet and the record form is what it replaces. The stimulus book you're still using. So I don't have to worry about the child picking up the iPad and throwing it when I'm trying to get them to touch which picture is the ball, because I'm still showing them the book and I can move the book into their workspace. If you're an early childhood assessor, you've experienced testing on the floor, under the table, with the child in your lap. All of those situations. The BEAS gives me some flexibility in how I am doing it. I really enjoy, now that I have overcome my fear, I really love using the mobile data solution. It's one of the strongest pieces. It allows me to be a little bit more flexible in moving. I'm not having to carry a clipboard around. I have a cover on my iPad so I can close it when I need to protect my data from the student because they've discovered I have an iPad. The test administration time. Have you ever given an achievement test to a young child and it takes you over an hour and you've lost them? I know I have. For the BEAS, if you are testing a child that is younger than 5, it's typically 30 to 40 minutes, well within their attention span. If you're giving them breaks, if you're reinforcing them throughout the assessment, then yes, 30 to 40 minutes is a good time. Now, if they're older than that, the most that I've experienced giving it to a early kindergarten student was 45 minutes. And I have not heard anyone share with me that it's taken them longer than that. That's very manageable for their attention span, for their ability to demonstrate to you what they know without, remember Dumont and Willis said they get fatigued. The amount of time that it takes to administer the BEAS does not overwhelm them. They can manage this and you are able to keep them on target. The scoring, When you subscribe, when you purchase a BEAS kit, you also purchase the access key and the subscription. And if you're using WJ4s now, and I'm sure you are, you know on the screen that you have a little icon at the bottom that shows the WJ4. It's very similar format. You go in, you enter your data, the raw score to a standard score. You get reporting options for parent and for teacher, just like you do right now. I want to show you what the report looks like, and then we'll talk a little bit more about something else. So this is a sample report. You still get your standard score. You get your scaled scores for the different subtests. But over here, I can tell where this child is. This child needs support in literacy development. They're on track with phonological awareness, on track with onset and rhyme, phoneme identification, and phoneme blending and segmenting. But they need us to monitor this and make sure we're making progress. Whoops, sorry about that. There we are. This is just a sample to show you how you get information. Now, I accidentally rolled my mouse over and you got to see the Battelle there. There are two additional uses for the BEAS that I think are great strengths. The authors of the test and Riverside recognize that we can start screening for dyslexia and dyscalculia in the young age range. We're not saying they have, but we are saying the characteristics are there and we need to monitor. And so I'm going to show you how the BEAS addresses this. For the dyslexia screening, you use the literacy domain. It allows you to look for the primary reading difficulties that are associated with dyslexia, the letter word identification, phoneme pronunciation, those early basic reading skills. Remember that they did a child development analysis and a skill development analysis. So basic reading skills for the target age group is print awareness and letter word identification, and then phoneme awareness. And just to break it down a little bit more, when we're looking at letter identification, upper and lower case in a visual presentation is the focus of that subtest. For phoneme pronunciation, it's that letter sound correspondence subtest that gives us a look at this skill. What we do is show them a letter and ask them to tell us what sound it makes. Or we may say the sound and they point to the letter. Basic reading skills at the upper level, it does include some sight words and some nonsense words, but it really also includes those book handling skills. And then the phoneme grapheme knowledge includes some nonsense words, some long vowel patterns, inflectional patterns, and early decoding. Phonological awareness, you know these skills: rhyming, breaking words into syllables, blending the words, onset rhyme, where we identify the initial sound in words and then we blend with another word part. The phoneme identification, the phoneme blending and segmenting, and then phoneme manipulation. Those are standard in our phonological awareness curriculum test, even for older children. The BEAS has these in a developmentally appropriate way and at an age appropriate age sequence, skill development sequence. When we're looking at dyscalculia screening, we reference the math portion. You know that dyscalculia is not, it's new to our field of being a diagnostician and identifying it. It's in the DSM-5. The BEAS takes a look at both IDEA and DSM-5. So if we're looking at the number counting and sets subtest. Those skills are calculation or number facts and then number concepts. That matches both IDEA and DSM-5 criteria for dyscalculia. When we're looking at IDEA, we're looking at it from math calculation or math reasoning. Geometry is not really recognized as a specific area in IDEA. It's more mathematical reasoning. But under DSM-5, it is identified. Measurement and data is a mathematical reasoning skill, not necessarily referenced in IDEA, but referenced in DSM-5. And then operations and algebraic thinking, that's a mathematical reasoning skill. And with larger numbers, it's even calculation. That's referenced in IDEA, but not in DSM-5. And remember, this is a screening. You're not saying the child has dyscalculia. You're saying that there are characteristics and the child should be monitored. So I want to bring you back to the pyramid. Remember that assessment is always the foundation of a strong ARD meeting, a strong IEP being developed for that child. The assessment is not just the individual evaluation that we've just completed. The state testing and the teacher input are also critical. And I cannot stress enough, including parents as a part of that building of the assessment. Those of you that use eSped know there's a field in the ARD document where we ask parents, what are your concerns about your child? And I always have the teachers share the IEPs with the parent ahead of time and get their input into the goals. Well, what I want to do now is give you my contact information. I've given you both my Denton ISD email as well as my TW email address. My TW email address will stay with me long after I have retired from the public school, because TW gives students, former students as well, an email address. This is a time where you've heard a lot of information about the BEAS. And so I want to open up for questions. If you've got a question, there is a field where you can put questions. Lori has said, thank you. You're welcome, Lori. I just know that you can reach out to me anytime with a question about early childhood assessments. ECI is the job that I'm doing right now with Denton ISD. So I'm assessing 2-year 11 months old. I don't get to give the BEAS to them, but I do go and help on elementary campuses when they have a community referral. Any other questions or comments that you have? If you've used the BEAS, what you think about it? I hope that if you've not used it, you consider it. It is a very strong tool for using in early childhood assessments. I think it's going to be helpful as Texas is moving us towards doing dyslexia screenings using something that is appropriate.
Yeah, and I'm looking too. I don't see any questions, but it would be I would be interested in knowing if you are using the BEAS, what are your thoughts? And also, you have another webinar coming up in the future. You want to?
Yes, I do.
What that's going to be?
Yes, I do. I am going to talk about the foundation to the Battelle suite. It is the Battelle Developmental Inventory 3rd edition. Now, I have been a Battelle user since it first came out in the mid-80s. I used it as the tool to monitor my kindergarten classroom's progress. And I have seen it evolve into one of the most usable tools that I have. I use it as part of my assessments with students coming in from ECI because most ECI programs in the state of Texas use the BDI. It gives you all of the developmental domains. It has a variety of approaches to how you can administer. I'm not going to give that away. You're going to have to come back and visit me while I show you about it.
Good. Do you remember what the date is on that?
For the Battelle
Yeah.
3, the Battelle 3 has only been out a couple of years. It is a brand new program. And I have to tell you, if you're using the BDI 2, it's about to go away.
Yeah,
I just got an update from Riverside.
Yeah, we're sunsetting the BDI 2. So yeah, you want to switch over. But what is the date for your upcoming webinar? Do you know that offhand?
It is after my spring break. Let me get into my calendar here. And put my computer screen glasses back on so I can read.
I know, I feel you.
Oh yeah. It is March the 23rd at noon.
Okay, so hopefully those of you will join us on the 23rd as well.
And you're going to see the Battelle bear again.
All right, well, I don't see any questions, so want to say thank you, Dr. Pettigrew, for coming here and sharing this information. Very informative, really appreciate it, and look forward to your future webinar with us.
Thank you. Come back and join us again, and we'll talk more about the Battelle.
All right, thanks everybody, and have a great day.